Hi class, this is the assignment that we did in class and it became homework if you didn't finish it, and I'm going to go through it all. A lot of you finished most of the first page, but I'm going to go ahead and go through it all. If you did a lot of it, then just fast forward and you can see some more of the bottom part or the back. Also, it's really good for you to pause it in between as well and try and solve it on your own as I go through it and see what you do know. And then when you get stuck with it, then you can watch some more. So find a method that works for you. Okay, so this is 218 Tuesday. If the parallelograms below are similar with a scale factor of 5 to 2, find x. So I need to use a proportion to find x. I know the scale factor is 5 to 2. I'm going to rewrite it like a fraction, and it's from large to small. This is a larger number. So that means when I set up my proportion, I'm going to go from the large figure to the small figure. So if I look at this figure here, I can see that this side corresponds to this side. They both fall between the two congruent angles here. So 10 corresponds with x. And I went from big to small. Big figure to small figure. And this was matching the big to small. Now we cross multiply to solve. So 5 times x equals 10 times 2. That means 5x equals 20. Divide by 5, and x equals 4. Polygons are similar if and only if corresponding angles are congruent and corresponding sides are proportional. Their ratios are the same. Number 2, find the scale factor from B to A. So we're going from this figure to this one, so from the big figure to the small one. And I need to look for corresponding sides to find the scale factor. And I can see that 16 corresponds with the 4. This is the long side of a rectangle, and this is the long side of a rectangle. So I can write 16 to 4, big to small, B to A. And simplifying that, divide by 4, I get 4 on the top. Divide by 4, I get 1 on the bottom. So my scale factor is 4, or 4 over 1. You could have used 8 and 2, and you'll get the same scale factor. That's the whole point. With similar figures, whatever pair of sides you pick, the ratios will be the same. Find the scale factor from A to B. So we're going from this figure to this figure. So I'm going to find a pair of corresponding sides. And I can see that congruent to this angle is congruent to this angle, and this angle is congruent to this angle. So if I wanted to use 27, for instance, that side would correspond with, let's see, 27 would correspond with the 9. Okay. Now I could have used 48 with 16, or I could have used 60 with 20. They'll all be 3 over 1. I could have done 60 corresponds with the 20, and again that would be 3 over 1. So that's our scale factor from A to B. Number 4, if the scale factor from figure A to B is 4 to 5, find x. So we're going to use a proportion. So 4 is to 5 as, now we're going from small to large, A to B here. So that means that when I find my corresponding sides, I see that x and 15, these two sides are corresponding. I'm going to put the x on top and the 15 on the bottom, because we're going from 4 to 5, A to B, and then x to 15. And then we cross multiply and solve. So 5x equals 4 times 15, which is 60. So x equals 12. Number 5. The scale factor from figure A to figure B is 7 to 2. Okay, so I'm going to rewrite that as 7 to 2. Now notice we're going from the big to the small. The big figure to the small figure. Now we can use this scale factor with the perimeters. We used it to find missing sides, but you can also use it to find the missing perimeter. We need the perimeter of the big figure. So that's going to be our unknown on the bottom. Let's call that big P. We don't, whoops, not on the bottom. we're trying to find the perimeter of figure A, which is the big one. The perimeter this goes on top. Right? This is the big figure. 7 is the big, 2 is the small. So P is the big, and then the small perimeter, we add these up, and we get 14, 26, 35. So the perimeter of the small figure is 35. We don't know what the perimeter of the big one is. So we're going to make a proportion. 7 to 2 as the big perimeter is to the small perimeter. 7 to 2 as big to small. Cross multiply and solve. So 2P equals 245. This is not going to divide evenly because it's not even. So P equals 245 divided by 2. Or you can put it in your calculator and you get 122.5. Either one of those answers is okay. So the perimeter of the big one is 122.5, which is bigger than the 35. That's what we would expect. Number 6. If triangle ABC is similar to triangle DEC, so I'm going to mark some of these sides as we go along. You'll notice this angle corresponds with this angle. This angle corresponds with this angle because they're vertical angles. That leaves these two to correspond. So I can see that I can find x and y here if I set up some proportions. So I'm going to solve for x first. Now x corresponds with 28. Notice x comes between the right angle and the one curvy mark, and 28 comes between the right angle and the one curvy mark. So x corresponds with 28. Now I'm not going to use 10 and y because I don't know what y is, but I can use 6 to 21. So x corresponds with 28, and that's going to be equal to 6, which corresponds with 21. Notice 6 comes between the two curvy marks in the right angle, and 21 comes between the two curvy marks in the right angle. Now I can cross multiply and solve. So it's 21x equals, and then 28 times 6 is 168. And then if I divide that by 21, you get 8. Divide by 21, divide by 21, x equals 8. So we've solved for 8. Now we're going to solve for y, and again we need to use a pair of sides where we already know the numbers. So 6 and 21, we can use those again. So 6 is to 21 as, now we need to solve for y. So 6 goes to 21 as 10 goes to y. And we can cross multiply and solve. So 6y equals 210, and 210 divided by 6 is 35. So y equals 35. Okay, let's look at the corresponding sides in this figure, and it might help to label the angles. J corresponds with N, and M corresponds with K, and L corresponds with P. So now I can set up a proportion using the correct sides. I'm going to go from the large figure to the small figure, and I can see that 7 corresponds with 7 to 2. It's going to be equal to, this side right here, 9x plus 1, is in between the 1 curvy mark and the 3 curvy mark, so that's going to correspond with x plus 5. Again, I have to be careful here. I'm going from big to small, so this has to be 9x plus 1 to x plus 5. And there's the proportion. The key is to get the correct proportion. 7 goes to 2, those two correspond, and this corresponds to this. And then we have to multiply, cross multiply. So 2 times 9x plus 1 equals 7 times x plus 5. Remember to put these in parentheses, it's the whole quantity. This is 18x plus 2, I'm distributing, equals 7x plus 35, right? Multiply, 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 multiply. Subtract 7x, I get 11x. I subtract 2, and I get 11x equals 33. You can do it any way you want to solve that. But that's what I get, and then I divide by 11, so x equals 3. Okay, number 8. And the nice thing about YouTube videos is you can slow them down. You could change the speed. If you go to settings on YouTube, you can change the speed and watch this even slower. Okay, so here we have triangle DGF. That's the big triangle. Okay, I'm going to highlight that big triangle. And that big triangle is similar to this smaller triangle, DHE. So I'm going to highlight that one down here, this one. Okay. Now, if we're going to look at corresponding sides, we can be careful here. DF is going to correspond with DE. So this whole side here, this whole big triangle, is 7. So 7 corresponds to the small side, 4. Okay, so this big side corresponds to the small side, as this big side, 2x minus 1, corresponds with the small. So I put the large over the small, and then the large over the small. And so these correspond, and this had to be added together to get that whole length. Now we can cross multiply to solve. So 7 times x plus 3 equals 4 times 2x minus 1. And we distribute and solve. 7x plus 21 equals 8x minus 4. Subtract 7x, so I get x over here, and add 4, and I get 25. And so I get x equals 25. Okay, number 9. Now this one's a little tricky because the order's a little bit backwards. So if MNPQ is similar to x, y, z, w. So I'm going to mark the angles here. So M corresponds with x. N corresponds with y. P corresponds with z. And Q, 1, 2, 3, 4, corresponds with W. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that can help us find corresponding sides. So in order to find the perimeter, we're asked to find the perimeter of each polygon. I'm going to need to find the scale factor first. So I notice that this polygon only has one side measured, so 4. What side does that correspond with on this polygon? Well, it's between the 4 and the 1 tick mark, so it's going to be this one. So 4 corresponds with 8. However, I did that backwards because it asked me to find the scale factor from here to here, not from here to here. I did it from here to here, so we don't want to do it like that. We want to do it from here to here. So actually I should put the 8 on top and the 4 on the bottom. We're going from the big figure to the small figure. Well, if I simplify that, that's 2 over 1, or 2. That's our scale factor. Okay, so we were asked to find the scale factor. Now we're going to use that scale factor to find the perimeter of this smaller one. So this larger one is our large perimeter. And this one will have, this is our unknown, our small perimeter. And our scale factor from large to small is 2 to 1. Okay? So our scale factor, 2 to 1, equals the large perimeter over the small perimeter. 2 to 1, large perimeter, small perimeter. The large perimeter we can find by adding these all up. That's 18 plus 16. That's 34. So our large perimeter is 34, and our small perimeter we don't know. So let's solve for it. Remember, from big to small, from big to small. Cross multiply, 2p equals 34, p equals 17. So our small perimeter here is 17. The big perimeter is 34. Big P equals 34. You just added them all up. Small perimeter is equal to 17. And how did we find the small perimeter? We used this big one, and we used the scale factor in a proportion. Okay, the back side. When we're solving problems like this, remember to multiply this ratio by x. So 7x to 11x. Okay, and we're told that these two angles are complementary. So 7x plus 11x would equal 90. So the trick here is to multiply by x. And then now we're going to add those two angles together and we get 18x equals 90, x equals 5. Okay, so we know that x equals 5. What is the supplement of smaller angle? Well, in order to find the smaller angle, I need to take this x equals 5 and take the smaller number here, 7, and multiply it by 5. So our smaller angle is 35 degrees. That's our smaller one. What is the supplement of that angle? Well, the supplement of that angle is going to be 180 minus 35. And that's going to be 145 degrees. So if the angle is 35, its supplement is 145, because these two will add up to 180. So the answer is 145. But you had to find the ratios first by multiplying by 9, add them together to equal 90, and solve for that small angle. Okay, number 10, the ratio of the measures of three angles in a triangle is 4 to 5 to 11. Find the measures of the angles. So we're going to multiply that ratio by x, so 4x to 5x to 11x. And now we can write this as an equation. 4x plus 5x plus 11x equals 180 degrees, because all the angles of a triangle add up to 180. So these are three angles adding up to 180. That's 20x equals 180. Divide by 20, and x equals 9. Okay, so we've solved for the x that we're multiplying everything by. Now, to find the measures of the angles, we'll take 4 and multiply it by 9, then take 5 and multiply it by 9, and then take 11 and multiply it by 9, and we'll get all three angles. So that's 36, 45, and 99. And if you add those all up, they will add up to 180. These are the angles of the triangle. Degrees. All right, solving the proportion for x, cross multiply. 5x equals 15 times 4, which is 60. So x equals 12. Cross multiply to solve. 9 times x plus 2 equals 8 times 3, which is 24. Okay, let's, remember I put this in parentheses. So now I distribute 9x plus 18 equals 24. I'll subtract 18 from both sides, and we get 9x equals 6. Right, if we subtract 18 from both sides. Now, to get x by itself, I have to divide by 9. So I'll divide both sides by 9. And we get x equals 6 over 9. Now, it's a fraction, and it is not simplified. We have a common factor here, 3 and 3. So divide this by 3 and divide this by 3, and we get thirds. So x is equal to 2/3. Alrighty, this last one here. Again, we're going to cross multiply to solve. So 9x equals 4 times the quantity 3x minus 1. So 9x equals 12x minus 4. Alright, we're going to subtract 9x, that's 3x, and I'm going to add 4. So some of you did this, and I think this is just fine. You didn't move the one that was by itself, you moved this one. So you said negative 12x on both sides. And so you get negative 4 here, and you get negative 3x here. And that's great. Now just divide by negative 3, and we get positive x equals 4 over 3. Now, the way I did it is I moved this over here and this over here at the same time. So I got this, and now if I divide by 3, look, I'm going to get the same answer. X equals 4 over 3. Alrighty, number 12. Students were given the choice between doing an oral report and a written report. All right, so there's 2 choices, oral or written. 18 of the 28 students chose to do an oral report, so 18 did an oral report. Find the ratio of oral to written. Well, we know 18 was oral report, 28 is the total number of students. So I'm asked to write the ratio of oral to written. Well, where's written? I don't see a written number here. Well, if you take the total number of students and subtract how many did the oral report, then you get 10. That's how many did the written. Okay? So remember, they had a choice, oral or written. So 18 of them did oral. If there's 28 students total, that means that 10 of them did the written. So I'm asked to write the ratio of oral to written. Well, oral is 18, and written was 10, right? Now I can simplify that because I don't see that choice here. So divide by 2, I get 9 to 5. And you know you can write that as 9 to 5, so the answer is B. All right, number 13, I just flat out tell you, set up a proportion to solve. You can see we have a ratio here. A person who weighs 200 pounds on Earth, so that's on Earth, okay, would weigh about 32 pounds on the moon. So I'm just writing this to tell you that this is the Earth and this is the moon weight. Well, that's going to be equal to, we want to know how much would the person who weighs 15 pounds on the moon weigh on Earth. So if he weighs 15 pounds on the moon, we need to put 15 down here. It needs to match our 32. Otherwise, our proportion isn't proportional in the way that we want it to be. So 15, he weighs 15 pounds on the moon. How much would this person weigh on Earth? So if they weigh 200 on Earth, they weigh 32 on the moon. How much would they weigh on Earth if they weigh 15 on the moon? So this should be a little bit smaller, right? We have 15 here and 32. This should be smaller than 200. Well, we're going to cross multiply and solve. So 32x equals 200 times 15. So that's 32x equals 3,000. And then to solve for x, we divide both sides by 32. So that's 3,000 divided by 32. And I'm going to use my calculator for that to see what that would be in a decimal. 3,000 divided by 32, and I get, oops, there again, 3,000 divided by 32 equals 93.75. So that's the decimal answer. If I want to leave it as a fraction by this, and it does have a common factor of 2, so I can divide this by 2, and I get 1,500. Divide this by 2, I get 16. Oh, it still has a common factor of 2, so I can divide both top and bottom again by 2, and I get 750 over 8. Oh boy, we can keep going. I can divide again by 2, so that's 375 divided by 4, and I think that's it. I don't think we can go any further to simplify that, and we get the same. So you can write it as a fraction, but keep dividing by 2 when they're even so that you get down to something that isn't simplifiable. Either one of these is fine. All right, set up a proportion to solve. If 8 out of every 10 men are colorblind, how many would be colorblind in a group of 3,000 men? Okay, so remember, we're going to set up a proportion. We have 8 out of every 100. How many would be colorblind? Okay, so if it's 8 colorblind on top, 8 of the 100 men are colorblind, then that means that we're trying to find how many would be colorblind out of 3,000 men. Notice my proportion is set up where these are the total number of people, total number of men, and this is how many men are colorblind. So it matches on the left-hand side, there's 8 colorblind men, and here we're trying to find how many colorblind in 3,000. take a moment to absorb that and really make sure you're putting the colorblind number on top. Cross multiply, 100x equals 8 times 3,000. So that's 100x equals 24,000. Divide by 100 and we get 240. So 240 men would be colorblind out of 3,000 men. All right, almost done. Number 15, use the Pythagorean theorem to solve. Remember, it's a squared plus b squared equals c squared, or another way we talk about it is leg squared plus leg squared equals hypotenuse squared. All right, so here we have a leg and a leg. These are the two sides that form the 90-degree angle. So leg is 2 squared plus the other leg is 3 squared, and the hypotenuse is the side opposite the x. Okay, so we have 2 squared plus 3 squared equals x squared. That's our hypotenuse opposite that 90-degree angle. So that's 4 plus 9 equals x squared. That's 13 equals x squared. Take the square root of both sides, and we get the square root of 13 equals x. That's what that length will be. Again, we're going to use the Pythagorean theorem, so we're going to set this up carefully. We have a leg and a leg. So x squared plus 2 squared equals, and this is our hypotenuse, opposite the 90-degree angle. So that's 5 squared. So x squared plus 4 equals 25. Subtract 4 from both sides, and we get x squared equals 21. Take the square root, and we get x equals the square root of 21, and we're done there. Now here we have a rhombus, and so we need to remember that in a rhombus, all 4 sides are the same. It's a parallelogram because this is parallel to this, and this is parallel to this. But also the diagonals meet at a 90-degree angle. So if I'm going to solve for x, I need to know that I'm going to use the Pythagorean theorem. Well, I have this leg here. This is a leg, and x is on a leg. These are legs. They form the 90-degree angle. And this side over here is the hypotenuse, and we know it's 10 because this is a rhombus. So all the sides are 10. So this is 10. All right, so if I'm going to write my Pythagorean theorem, it's going to be x squared plus 7 squared equals 10 squared. So that's x squared plus 49 equals 100. And then x squared equals 51. And then take the square root, and we get x equals the square root of 51. Okay. Now, 16a and 16b. This is a parallelogram, so the opposite sides are parallel. So this is not a rhombus, this is a parallelogram. That means that I can say that this angle here and this angle here are congruent because they're alternate interior. So 24 equals 4x. All right, we'll divide by 4, and you get x equals 6. But do you see how we set that up? These are alternate interior. This is a parallelogram, so opposite sides are parallel. So that means that 32 equals y minus 10. So if I add 10 to both sides, then I get y equals 42. So those are our two answers for that parallelogram. Now this is a rhombus, so this is a little different, but we can use some of the same information. So I know that this is 40. So this is a rhombus, which is a parallelogram. Remember, it's a kind of a parallelogram. So that is parallel to that, and that side is parallel to that. So automatically, I can see that if this is 40, then y is 40. Right? They're alternate interior. But this is a rhombus, so it's really special because the diagonals bisect the angles. So if this one is 40, guess what? So is this one. So Z also equals 40. And if this is bisecting this angle, it's also bisecting this angle, so these two are also congruent. So 2x equals 40, that means x equals 20. So the fact that it's a parallelogram told us that y was 40, but it's also rhombus. So this is 40 and this is 40, and it turns out this is 40 and this is 40 as well. Okay, so that is the video, and I hope it helps. See you in class.